Hey, it's the House of AC time. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to talk to you today. If you've got questions, this is the episode to kind of drop in all your questions about sort of reaching financial freedom through real estate, which is obviously something near and dear to my heart, as well as to our guests. Um, if you don't know me, I'm AC, otherwise known as Alan Corey. I've written a few books on this topic. I've got multiple rentals. This is passive, my passion is passive income. And not all real estate investments are passive, but you can make it very passive through property management and investing in the right things that are sort of hands off, and getting the right team in place. And Dion McNeely, who's our guest today, is someone who's well versed and basically overcoming all the obstacles that life can give you and creating a new life for himself, financial freedom, directly through real estate. And so we're going to hear his very inspiring story about how he got started and where it's brought him. And I where I met Dion McNally, and this will be the first time I was officially meeting, but we seem to be in all the same real estate investing groups on Facebook. And I'm probably in about a dozen of them. And whenever I'm about to answer something, someone's got a question, and I see that Dion has answered it, I'm like, I don't even need to answer, because Dion has the exact same answer or a better answer than I would have every single time. And so he's very well versed in this, and someone I really respect without knowing someone, just by reading his Facebook comments. So all you guys out there who want to make a name for yourself, I mean, that's a way to do it. I don't know if Dion is doing that purposely, but we'll bring him in and we'll get chatting. And like as always, this episode is brought to us by Jasmine Mortgage Team. If you are wanting to get a mortgage, real estate related, or a real estate investing related or not, Jasmine Mortgage Team, it can help you with your primary residence, your cash out refis, HELOCs, everything like that. So reach out to jasminemortgageteam.com for that. That being said, Dion McNeely, welcome to the House of AC.
Howdy. Thanks for having me here, Alan. It's kind of cool to put a face to the Facebook comments.
Right. Yeah.
It's been the same for me. There's a few names like Jeff Stevens, Michael Zuber, Alan, that you just, when I see a question, because that's how I got involved in doing the social media aspect of teaching people about real estate, was I was answering questions on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I would see a lot of people had very similar answers, and I would look at them. I would realize, wow, I don't know that subject very well, and I would know what to go research before I would answer a question. And so it's the same when I see your answer pop up. It's just like watching one of those other names I named off, where that's good info.
Yeah, totally. And to be honest, that like when I was prepping my book, I just started copying and pasting all the questions everyone has asked in all these real estate investing forums. And I'm like, if someone's asking this in forum, they're going to ask it when they're reading a book. So I tried to answer them all in my book, House Fire: Financial Independence, Retire Early, to basically, try to be that FAQ for everyone out there. But people who don't know your backstory, do you mind sort of sharing how you got into real estate, what you were doing, what was going on in your life, and where it brought you today?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. One of the things I really like doing is showing people that an average person, like nothing special, not super educated, not super smart, just a normal guy, can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, even if you're not starting from the best position. Literally making work optional just by making some key decisions that it seems like a lot of people think are a lot more complicated than they really are.
Right.
I had made it to 40, basically without ever having more than $1,000 in the bank. My original life plan was 20 years Marine Corps, 20 years law enforcement, and then retire with 2 pensions. After Desert Storm, the Marine Corps downsized, so reenlisting wasn't an option. In 2008, I was laid off from a police department because during a recession, everyone knows there's no more crime, so we don't need cops anymore, and the cops were laid off.
That's how that works. Yeah.
Right. So I was really tired of my sources of income being taken away due to things I couldn't control. And I was a single parent with 3 kids. In the divorce, I found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name I didn't know existed until the divorce. And I live in Washington, which is a community property state, which meant it was our debt. And then she filed bankruptcy, so it became my debt. So my starting position wasn't very good. And I had started working at a truck driving school, teaching people how to drive trucks after getting laid off from law enforcement. making $17 an hour. So that was my starting position around 2009. Not making a lot of money, bad debt to income ratio, single parent with 3 kids. And I decided to use real estate to reach financial freedom because it was something I could have some control in. I had some examples. My brother retired at 50 with 10 paid off rentals. I have a friend with 30 units that ran a realty office, had 19 agents working for him. And I thought, okay, so they're kind of normal guys. I mean, I look up to both of them, but I figured if they can do it, I can probably do it. They were in a very different position than me. My brother had a paid off house, so he kept recycling a home equity line of credit. He would take out his equity from his house, buy a mobile home on acreage in the middle of nowhere that was falling down, and then he had craftsman skills. He would build it into a nice rental, pay off the HELOC, rinse and repeat. I didn't have a paid off house. I actually was underwater on my house. I owed more than what it was worth. And I had a full-time job. So, quitting my job and starting as a real estate agent to be working in an office like my friend who has 30 units wasn't an option either. And my bad debt to income ratio was a real strong barrier. So I think if there's somebody watching, if you have a bad debt to income ratio, maybe not making a lot of money, but want to get on the property ladder, if you own a house, here's what I did. And even if you're renting, there is a way to do this. I moved from my house into an apartment and I started renting out the house. A couple of lenders I talked to said with my debt to income ratio, I couldn't buy another property. And I really would struggle to save a down payment to buy an investment property, only making $17 an hour with a bunch of bad debt. So I moved into an apartment and rented out my house for 2 years.
So real quick. So you owned your house. Was there mortgage on the house?
There was, and I was underwater. I
Okay.
owed about $138,000 at that time, and it was worth around $100 because of the housing crash from 2008.
And when you said you moved into an apartment, you were renting that apartment, right?
I moved into an apartment and started paying $1,500 a month in rent and rented the
Okay.
house out very poorly in the beginning. I was uneducated, didn't read books like yours, didn't find bigger pockets, hadn't read any blogs. I just figured I'm going to replace my income and make work optional with no training or education whatsoever. What could go wrong? So I rented to a friend with no lease on a handshake. He was also a single parent. So when he had struggles, I identified with that, and rent became late, which then became later and then never. And when I finally went to the house to find out what was going on and have a face-to-face conversation, I found out he didn't even live there. He had moved out and rented the house to someone else and was keeping the rent. So I tried to quit. I figured this is just not for me. There's no way I can handle this. I'm working full-time, got 3 kids to raise. This is a side hustle that I don't have the skill set for. But I was upside down on the house. I owed more than it was worth. I couldn't give it away. Subject to wasn't an option. Nobody would buy it. So luckily, I was stuck with that property. And I realized the problem is I'm not educated. I don't know what I'm doing. So I started reading. This is, 2009, 10. Bigger Pockets really wasn't a big podcast or even on YouTube much yet, but they had blogs, like actual articles written by guys like Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time. He was a writer on there. And I found out about house hacking and how to screen a tenant, how to get a lease, like all the real basics that I just started without knowing.
Right.
Got a good tenant in my house. 2 years later, once I had rental income on my tax returns, I was able to save a small down payment. It was about $20,000 total to do this. And that was working overtime, working some side hustles, saving, avoiding life creep, keeping my expenses low. I purchased a duplex. The rental income from my house being rented out fixed my debt to income ratio because they would look at the rental income on the other side of the duplex. So I moved in and reduced my housing expense from $1,500 a month to $300 a month. When you're only making $17 an hour, a $1,200 increase to your savings rate is massive.
Wow.
It then took another 2 years to save a down payment to buy the next duplex. But then this thing started to happen that I call the income snowball. As you purchase cash flowing assets, the cash flow, as long as you don't increase your life, get the bigger car, take more vacations, and just eat out all the time because you can. You have to avoid doing those things and just keep adding to the savings rate. The income snowball made the next duplex come at about 1.5 years. So instead of saving for 2 years, and I think that's the hardest part about getting into investing as a new investor, is it's normal to compare my year 10 to a new investor's year 1. Right. And when you hear that currently I have 16 rental units, My cash flow profit for last year was 128,000 after all expenses and setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancies, which is numbers that wouldn't have registered with me mentally when I was making 17 an hour and in a bunch of bad debt. So in 10 years, the numbers look very different. But for those first 5, before the income snowball kicks in, before your assets are producing more money than your job is, it's slow. You need patience. It was 2 years between buying the next deal, which is a lot of time to educate myself. It sped up. I then added a fourplex, which I'm house hacking now. I'm actually being paid $2,500 a month in profit to live in the unit that I do, which is 1,236 square feet, 2-bedroom, 2-bath with my own garage, my own shed, my own driveway. I've seen the neighbors like 3 times in 2 years. So house hacking is very powerful and doesn't mean you have to share your living space.
And if you're not familiar with the term house hacking, that's where you live in one unit of a small multifamily and you rent out the other units. And ideally, if the numbers work, those other units cover all of your mortgage. If not, there's a surplus as well. That would be the best case scenario. But even at a minimum, if it covers half your mortgage payment, that's still a great deal. Like you're living on fewer dollars than most people around you. And yeah, I get, I'm a realtor. I got a team of realtors here in Atlanta, and the feedback is I don't want to share a wall with anyone. I don't want to live next door to my tenants. What do you say to those sort of objections or worries?
So it's not a requirement to house hack. If you make 6 figures, you can save the down payment for investment properties fairly easy as long as you can control your spending. I wasn't making 6 figures. I didn't make 6 figures for the first 5 to 7 years of investing. After 40, how many millions of families live in apartments? Are our families that much different? And most people think I can't house hack because I have kids. I moved from my house into an apartment, and people would think their kids might be a barrier. My kids were the reason. Instead of me now retiring with just Social Security without getting the 2 pensions I wanted, my kids are going to inherit millions. I will have a surplus of funds to take care of my own health needs as I get older. So I'm not going to be a burden to my kids. Like they were the motivation to do this. And when I ran it by my kids, they were excited. They said,
Right.
So we live in this house, okay, so families listening. We lived in a 4-bedroom house on a lake with private lake access, with basketball courts and tennis courts and a beach with barbecue area. When we moved into the apartment, my kids were excited. My daughter said, I get to be the new girl at a school. And you know how many kids live in apartment complex that we're going to get to play with that don't live out here, which was to an adult, the lake was the goal. But to my kids, this was kind of the middle of nowhere. They loved the apartment idea. So if you have the conversation with your family, you might find that some of the objections we have are in our heads. With my duplexes, I prefer side-by-side units with garages in the middle. So you don't even have shared living walls. You have 2 garages between them. There's also the option of buying a house with an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, basically 2 houses, 1 property. Numbers work just like a duplex, but you don't even touch the building they're in. And one of the benefits to house hacking is it's like living in an area with neighbors, except you get to pick them.
Right.
And our housing expense is often our largest expense. For most people, it goes housing, taxes, and then healthcare, food, transportation. I mean, this is kind of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you can reduce or eliminate your largest expense, I reached financial freedom without ever having a budget. I have every streaming service there is. I now have nice vehicles. For 5 years, I was fairly frugal, but you do not have to be frugal to be financially free. I could have quit work in 2018, making 2 or 3 times what I've pretty much ever made in any job I've had.
Yeah. No, yeah. So and then even for the people out there who don't want to they just can't marry themselves to the house hacking concept. I did an episode previously on ways to make money off of your single family home that you live in. I talked about on Instagram Live earlier today. Stash, sort of like a mustache, but you're stashing goods. There's a company there where you can rent out a portion of your basement or your garage for people to stash their goods. Like it's almost like a self-storage Airbnb situation. Sniff Spot is if I've got a fenced yard or a great acreage where maybe dog owners just want their dogs to run free. There's no dog parks nearby. You can rent out your yard at Sniff Spot. Swimply was one where you can rent out your swimming pool for like birthday parties and pool parties and stuff. So to me, it's the house hack is if you're got these four units, and some people I just can't get married to that idea. but you can also just buy a quadruplex and rent it out, or find ways to earn some extra income to offset this big living expense in your life through all these other auxiliary services that are out there, where you can rent a yard or a garage or a parking spot in your driveway. Like, as all that money adds up, especially if it's a year to year lease, and it's coming in month to month. So there's so many options out there, but it all starts with owning something, owning some real estate. So have you ever had to get creative, or is it, I would imagine it's buying that second or third or fourth property, your mortgage lender is like, "Hey, Dion, you got to get a higher paying job." How did you overcome that?
So that's the beauty of the way that I invested, which is information I got from sources like One Rental at a Time and Bigger Pockets. Your debt to income ratio is almost completely irrelevant after 2 years of having rental income on your tax returns. You have to the lender, you're not a risk so much because you have proven that you can find tenants, vet tenants, maintain the property, collect the rents, pay the mortgage. It's those first 2 years that scaling quickly you can run into a problem where your debt to income is a consideration. The thing I would like people to take away is the way that I invested. There's no secret sauce. I didn't do any seller financing. I've done no DSCR loans, no creative financing. I have not paid all cash for any properties. All of my deals are from the MLS. So I didn't do door knocking, mailers, hire skip tracers, nothing. I was working full time, raising 3 kids. So I call myself the lazy investor because it had to be easy for it to work for me. All of my loans are conventional loans. 2 have been house hacked, so owner occupied. One of the benefits there too is with house hacking, you're reducing or eliminating your housing expense, but you're also getting low down payment and best interest rates. You get that lowest interest rate possible when you own or occupy. So I have loan products that I refinanced in 2020 that are at the 3% on investment properties, because in 2020 I lived there, which didn't
Yeah,
make it an investment property.
you're going to get the lowest rates that way for sure.
Right.
And
So that's how you get around the multiple mortgage problem, up to 10 mortgages in your own name. And if you're married, you can put 10 in each of your names and have up to 20 mortgages that are conventional, where they will look at 75% of rental income in your debt to income ratio. So if you're buying cash flowing properties, that generally means, my lenders have said, you can buy anything you want with no loan limitations whatsoever, as long as you have the down payment. So if it's owner occupied, my down payment is significantly less. But if it's an investment property, they usually want 25% down. So as I save that down payment. And another thing that it takes to add mortgages is they also want you to have reserves. So the lenders I've worked with, most want you to have at least 3 months of all of your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payments as a reserve. So that can add up as your portfolio grows. But one way around that, and I did this before I emptied it out, but lenders will look at your retirement accounts. 50% of a retirement account will count as a reserve. You don't have to tap it or take it out. You just have to prove that it's been in there for more than 3 months. So it's seasoned funds that you say, this is my reserve, so that you don't have to save a down payment, closing costs, money for immediate repairs, and reserves, because that starts to add up quick. So when you use your retirement account as a reserve, that can mean that you need less money to buy the next investment property. And then the one thing I really want to touch on is hopefully something I could share with you too, that I think you said you hadn't heard when we talked before hitting record. One of the main reasons I'm able to find my deals on the MLS using conventional lending is because I have a strategy that gets my tenants to request a rent increase. And when they ask for the rent to go up and I acquiesce, I say, sure, they thank me. Being able to find properties on the MLS with confidence, because 100% of the time so far it has been effective, and not just on my deals, but I have a small YouTube channel, about 10,000 subscribers. They're people that I've worked with to help reach financial freedom. It's been effective for them. So I have several videos coming out. I have one coming out this Thursday with 2 people that I met. I'm one of the teaching assistants in the Bigger Pockets boot camps that they do. And so 2 guys partnered, bought a duplex, just used this strategy, and they got a 40% rent increase at the tenant's request.
All right, real quick, Daniel Gonzalez comments, such an underrated channel. I mimic that. Dion Talk Financial Freedom is on YouTube. Definitely worth subscribing to. Just what you're saying now, I could tell that you've taught this over and over again and really been a great mentor to people and in real estate. So yeah, I would imagine all of our listeners now, their ears perked up. how do I get my tenant to beg and say, please raise my rent?
And they do. They literally say, would you please raise my rent 40%?
I
And they're
love it. I
serious.
love it.
And when you
Yeah.
agree, they're happy.
Right.
And it sounds, what do you call it? Sarcastic when I say it that way. And I do say it that way to kind of get attention, but it's real. I use the strategy in the last 12 months on all 16 of my rental units, and I experienced a 20, so the lowest, to 28% rent increase at tenants' request. So the strategy comes because when I originally buy properties, I'm working. I don't want to buy something I need to rehab. I've
Mhm.
never done kitchen cabinets. I've never done countertops. I've never done a full rehab. I prefer to buy either rent ready, or my golden ticket is already occupied properties. Generally, the properties with tenants, the sellers are lazy. They're trying to exit this thing. They're older. They tried it and didn't like it, or they just inherited it. Because the best thing to do with tenants is to stay up with rent increases so that you can afford things like repairs and maintenance. So if they're selling, tenants have usually been ignored. Maintenance hasn't been done. Everything is dated. So I'm buying a property where the tenants know they're below the area average rents. They haven't looked at buying a house, usually. That's why they're tenants. They haven't looked at moving because the previous landlord just left them alone. So they don't know what area average rents are. So they don't care what your expenses are. If your expenses mattered, a property where you have a mortgage and a property that was paid off would rent for very different amounts. The person with
Right.
the mortgage has more expenses, so they would need more rent, and that doesn't happen. When you go to rent a place, you have no idea if they have a mortgage or if it's paid off. You're paying what that rental will go for in your area. So what I do,
Right.
and I actually call this, and I have one here, I call this the binder. I take a physical 3-ring binder, and this does work through text or email. Like, I've used this on the housing authority for my Section 8 tenants, and they've asked for the rent to go up. So you don't have to go in person, but I do it when it's a tenant that I can go and physically meet. The binder, the first page is a picture of the property from Redfin or Zillow or Trulia or one of those platforms, with the amount that I paid for it and the current Zestimate or Redfin estimate of the value of the property right on the front page. This is information your tenant can look up in a month after you close anyways. So it's not like I'm sharing something secret. But the tenants have been living in a place that someone owned for 10 or 20 years and purchased for $100,000 or $200,000. So when they see that I just paid $600,000 for this property and its estimated value is $750,000, I can say things like, my homeowner's insurance and my taxes are going to be based on these valuations. So your rent makes sense to the person who owned it 10 or 20 years ago. This is what
Right.
I'm dealing with. And the tenants don't care. Remember,
Right.
our expenses don't matter. But it does get the conversation going in the right way. The next page, when you open the 3-ring binder, the first page is a picture of a map from apartments.com or Zillow or whatever works in your local area. In my area, I use apartments.com. All of the rentals that have the same number of bedrooms. So you want the units to be as similar as possible. How many bedrooms do you have? 2 or 3? You're looking at rentals with the same number of bedrooms. After that, each page is a printout of that from that map, all of those rentals. And here's an example of the video that's coming out this Thursday of the 2 guys that partnered on this duplex. The tenants were living there at $1,000 on one side. The new owner moved into one side, they're house hacking, and the other side was at $1,000. They went on, they printed out a bunch of things in the area that were $1,550, $1,600, $1,650. So the area average rent was around $1,600. The best thing for this new owner to do would be to, logically, running a business, kick the tenant out, completely disrupt their life, displace them, rehab the unit, get best area average rents, which is what a lot of landlords do, which is why a lot of landlords have a bad name. So this tenant, maybe they're busy like me, maybe they're lazy like me, this new owner. Instead of kicking the tenant out, they go there with a binder and they show them, this is what I paid. Here's all the rentals around here for $1,500 to $1,700. That's their average. Then they gave the binder to the tenant and they said, what do you think would be fair? What tenant has ever been involved in the conversation of setting their rent other than before they rent a place, they're looking at all the rentals?
Right.
So the tenant looked at that. They kind of understand the best thing for the owner would be to kick them out, rehab the place, spend $5,000 to $10,000 at a minimum, and then rent it for $1,500 or $1,600. So the tenant asked, can we raise the rent to $1,400? If we do that, would you sign a 1-year lease? Now this person who probably would have wanted a 1,500 if they rehabbed it gets a 1,400 without having to rehab anything. They'll make
Right.
minor repairs. They'll replace things. When I buy a property, I put in coated locks. I replace exterior lights with motion sensor LEDs. So I do, and then I ask the tenant if there's anything they would like fixed, if there's something that I didn't catch in the inspection. So I am going to take care of the place, but I don't have to do a full rehab. And then the tenant gets a $400 increase to their rent that they asked for. In this case, with these two that are in this video, they thanked the new owner
Yeah.
because they know they could have got kicked out. They could have had the rent raised up to a point where they couldn't have afforded it. But without having to do a rehab, the new owner gets a better rent. The tenant gets the rent increase. They're able to afford it because they were involved in the conversation. They knew what their budget was. So normally I do that with properties that I purchase. That's where that evolved from. My first couple didn't go that way. Like I said, when I had my first tenant, I did everything wrong. But then I educated myself and I understood that educating the tenants on what the reality of the rental in the current market is was the best way to justify a rent increase. You don't have to. Yes, you can totally say it's my property, I set the rents, and then you can continue to give landlords a bad name, which is the response I get from some owners sometimes.
Right.
In 2020, we had the pandemic and rents skyrocketed. They went up 30 to 40% in my area as soon as the eviction moratorium was over and rent increases were allowed. So I went and I used the binder strategy on all of my tenants, all existing tenants, and I purchased one duplex in 2021 and did the binder strategy then as well. Across the board, 20 to 28% rent increase at tenants' request. They're happy. My income for the year will go up. I'll be able to afford increases to insurance and property taxes that come up. I'll be able to afford to continue to build the reserves to take care of a roof replacement, a water heater breaking. I'll actually be able to run a successful business. My tenants don't have to move. They're happy with the current rates. They're still paying a little bit below area average rent. So they're still getting a good deal. And we had that conversation. So we feel more like peers than owner renter, the relationship most people have with their tenants. And for me, it's been very good at limiting tenant turnover. I've been investing now for a little over 10 years. I have 16 rental units. Up until this month, I've only had 2 tenant turnovers.
Oh,
One
wow.
died, one inherited a house, and now I have one that just bought a house. Like I helped, I was like, here's an agent, here's a lender, here's how you buy. I try to help all the tenants get on the property ladder if I could. And another one's moving out of the area. So I'm now about to have 2 more. I'm going to double my tenant turnover because of that.
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
the
and
strategy to get your tenants to
that,
request a
that,
rent increase.
that's a great. I love the binder strategy because I think a lot of newer investors are worried about vacancies and things like that. But you don't even have to budget for vacancies because if you had 2 turnovers in 10 years, I mean, and you seem like someone who takes good care of your property and also is a great responsive landlord. I would imagine even when you did have a vacancy, you were able to rent it for market rates really quickly. Um, and
An
also I
example,
would, yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
an
go for it.
example is right now the tenant that purchased the house. I had 27 applicants before I put it on apartments.com because tenants said, this is a landlord who fixes things. This is a landlord that doesn't charge us above or area average rents. And so I've already got a tenant. Like
Yeah.
I'm going in, I am replacing 2 faucets and a sink and a ceiling fan, like minor things, before they can move in. But they're ready. Like I've never had a even the 2 turnovers I had before. One was immediate, like end of month, start of month, and the other one was 4 days. So I still
Yeah.
budget for vacancy, but I've never had one.
I mean, I think you've set the high bar for being a landlord, and I usually tell my clients the opposite, where I'm saying, guys, think of every landlord you've ever had, right? And how they have been unresponsive or rude or just completely disorganized. That is like the typical bar of a landlord. And what I found is if, as long as I acknowledge my tenant's request within 24 hours, it doesn't mean I fixed it. It's like, hey, got your email, got your text, got your voicemail, whatever it is. I'm looking into it. Then there's just they rest easy, and then they tell me I'm the best landlord they've ever had, and that's like all I did was respond to you or acknowledge that you have a question or a complaint, and made me a superstar landlord. And I think you've taken it the next level, and you're not being like you still have boundaries. Like they're not. I think when you have that relationship, they're not expecting you to show up 2 o'clock in the morning to fix a toilet or anything like that. Like they see
No,
you
no,
as
they're not.
a
And one of the
teammate.
things
Yeah.
that helps me invest is having systems in place that I didn't have that first year. I recommend having a conversation with your tenants and educating them on 3 words. These 3 words will make being a landlord so much easier for you: fire, flood, or blood. These are the 3 things you can call me for. Everything else gets a text or an email. And here's my handyman's contact info. Any repairs or maintenance up to $500 that they're going to charge me, they have, because I develop a relationship with at least 2 handymen, they can do without contacting me and then get paid for afterwards. Anything above 500, they have to check first. I think in the last year, I've probably had maybe 5 text messages on something I had to respond to. Managing 16 rental units takes me less than 2 hours a month, and that's even counting the time it takes to open the account and see that the rents were paid. Like the amount of time it takes to do that is in that 2 hours by having
Yeah.
systems in place.
Yeah, and I think that's something I learned too. Is like once you have grow your portfolio to a certain amount, it actually gets easier and takes less time because you have property management software. Like I had one where it's like you would have to go all. I was like, don't text or email me or call me. You have to go log into this portal and do your concern. And if they selected, it was like pest control, it would just say, hey, this is the pest control number. You've got unlimited calls. Call them and schedule them yourself when you're home to let them in. If it's a plumber, it would say, explain your plumber, and it would send an email directly to the plumber. If it was an electrician, it would do the same to the electrician. And I was just BCC'd on these communications that the software management was doing for me. And then some tenants that I would just have printed out the same sort of workflow if they didn't have internet access or whatever, and say, here, pest control, this is what you do. It's just a to-do list to live here. And but it took me, doing it myself, property managing myself, finding that pest control company that I liked, finding that plumber that I trusted. That takes some time and takes some reps. But once you have like 5 units or more, that plumber, you're now that premium plumber's contact, because you're 5 houses worth of work that needs to be done. And so you're always going to go to the top. They're going to respect you more, answer your appointments first, because they're now wanting to please that one person that has 5 homes more than that one person who has 1 home and maybe never called them again. So I found that expenses got cheaper, my life and my time opened up more, the more properties I owned, because I could scale and sort of use these systems as you talk about.
I would totally agree. I think when I had 1 rental or 2 or 3 units, it felt like it took 20 hours a week. But once you have
Yeah.
the systems in place, it's 2 hours a month. And
Right.
here's a quote I like to keep kind of in the back of my mind. And I've heard this a couple different places. Treat your properties like you have 100. You need systems in place like you had 100. How would you handle a plumber call if you had 100 properties? You would systematize it the way you did. But
Right.
treat your tenants like you only have 1. So
Oh, I
treat your
like that.
properties like you have 100, tenants like you have 1, least amount of problems, least amount of headaches. It's worked out great for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at this point, I've got a property management company managing all my properties. So I'm leveraging their systems. And so it's great where I don't even know who my tenants' names are. I don't have to do anything. I just have to keep tabs a little bit on my property management company, but I trust them. They've earned my trust over time. And like that's another scale and another system where it's like, you don't even have to log in for 2 hours a week. It's just a check shows up in your inbox, kind of thing. So there's definitely ways to sort of level up, and I think a lot of people they quit after that first one or after 2. And if you're listening and you find yourself like it gets easier, buy it, get to 5 and life gets easier, kind of thing, or get your software property management. Do you have any sort of tools or software management tools that you use, or any other?
So
Yeah.
it's actually at my work desk. No.
Okay.
I use apartments.com to list my rentals, right?
Hmm.
So that's basically the closest I come to using software. I have an Excel spreadsheet for expenses that I send to my CPA, built with the columns that they wanted in there. I have an interview on Thursday with the CEO of Hemline. which is a software for self-managing your rentals. I only have 16. If my goal was to have 50 or 100 or more, I would probably start developing systems to use software because it's easier to scale. My goal was financial freedom. And I don't think that comes from 16 units. I think it comes from 14 or 12. When I have gained appreciation, I have experienced principal pay down, I might sell off 1 or 2 properties, use that money to pay off 2 or 3 mortgages, and increase the cash flow. Right now, with 16 rental units, there's $14,000 a month in rental profit without having to get out of bed. Financial freedom for me happened at 3,000, right?
The 3,000.
So
Yeah.
I can increase cash flow and decrease the number of properties. So we have a different investing strategy. That's the beautiful thing about financial freedom. There's so many ways to do it. Michael Zuber has almost 200 units, and he has property management. The Lumberjack Landlord has about 120 units, and he self-manages. So that's impressive to me. At 16, I feel like I'm either going to manage my properties for 2 hours a month, or I'm going to manage a property manager for 2 hours a month. So to me, it's the cash flow coming to me makes more sense. If I was going to scale like you, I would definitely have property management.
Yeah. Well, to me, I realized, what do I enjoy the most? I enjoy finding the deal and acquiring deals. And so all I wanted to do is be in the acquisition mode and not in the property management deal, because the more I did the property management, the more, the fewer deals I could analyze and look at and stuff like that. So I just tried to focus on stuff that I enjoyed and loved. Where do you stand on sort of your debt to income ratio on your properties? Are you sort of in the mode to try to pay them all off and have them all off in cash, or do you reinvest, do cash out refis and get all your money back? What's sort of your debt allegiance in your portfolio?
So that's a great question. You kind of have a choice as you're growing your portfolio to recycle capital or recycle cash flow. So recycling capital is selling a property in 1031ing, or using a home equity line of credit, or taking a cash out refinance. 3 things I have never done and don't plan on doing. I recycle cash flow. So in the first 5 years, I did, avoid life creep, 15, 20-year-old cars, no streaming services. A big day out was the movies, not Disneyland, right? For 5 years. My life's very different now. I just spent 2 months in Florida scuba diving, and just to see how long I could stay until I got bored. I'm about to take a cruise to Alaska. I'm probably going to work 3 or 4 months out of the year, and the rest of the time just goof off. That's not how the first 5 years went. My opinion on debt is I want to save money and then put it into a rental property and have it produce cash flow. If I took the money out, I would have more units. But again, my goal is not more units. It was more cash flow. So I purchased properties. My goal is usually a 10% or better cash on cash return year 1. By year 3, that's turning into a 20% cash on cash or better, because rents go up, payments don't change too much. I've refinanced in 2020 when rates went down. So watching the market to know when to refinance, rate and term, not to pull money out, to get a better payment to increase cash flow. I do value adds. Sometimes I bought a duplex that had 2 bedrooms each side with a den on each side. So 2 walls later, I now have a 3-bedroom each side duplex renting out for way more. And it cash flowed when it was just 2 bedrooms. That's one of the ones that just had a turnover. My goal is to be about 70% leveraged. I want 30% equity so I can handle things like a massive rent decrease, which here's a statistic for people to take a note of. Since 1914, when we started tracking the data, there has never once been a time when market rents decreased. In 2009, Class A rentals dropped enough to where it looked like the market dropped, but Class C and B went up because people who went through foreclosures became renters, increasing demand. So in more than my lifespan, we have never seen a rent decrease, but my portfolio is designed to handle a 50% renting decrease without me having to touch my own funds. So I'm prepared for the worst, even though we've never seen it in our lifetimes. And that's just since we started tracking the data. I don't know what happened before that. Right. So at 70% leveraged, I'm gaining enough appreciation on multiples of what I've invested. That's the power of leverage. But I'm not over leveraged because I can handle a market crash. And rents, market crash and prices do not impact a buy and hold investor. I don't have adjustable rate mortgages. It's all 30-year fixed rate. I'm looking at 4-year fixed rate now with a couple of loans. I don't plan on paying mortgages off. The tenants will do that over time. I don't count on appreciation. It's really one of those things that just happens that we benefit from. And if it didn't
Mhm.
happen, I wouldn't care, because appreciation and principal paydown can disappear like they did in 2008. It is possible. I don't see that coming. The crash that we're in right now is a crash in transactions. The number of deals being done is going to be less, and we're going to lose the bottom end. So it's going to make it look like the median home price goes up, because as we lose
Right.
that bottom end, the median goes closer to the top end. So people calling for a housing crash in prices, I think we'll be shocked when we don't see that. But I think it's going to be easier to find a motivated seller now that less deals happening means more days on market. So I'm more excited about the next year than the last 10 as far as investing goes, because this is going to be one of the first times in my investing where we're going to be able to actually find motivated sellers, because we'll have enough days on market to even identify them.
Right.
Right now, I'm about 45% leveraged. So I'm very far under leveraged, and that's because of the massive appreciation we had in the last 2 years. So I might actually use my VA loan, which I have not done yet, on not my next purchase, but the one after that. I'm going to house hack another fourplex and do 0 down to bring up my leveraged position to closer to where I want it to be.
So you're still house hacking. You're still moving every couple of years with opportunity strikes.
I've only moved twice.
Okay.
Once to a duplex, once to a fourplex. But to use the VA loan, that would require an owner occupancy. So I will do it one more time with a fourplex, and that'll probably be the last time. You don't have to move every year. You can benefit every year, but you don't have to. I'm too lazy to do that. Twice was enough.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, that's, if you don't qualify for a VA loan, you have to be in the military to qualify for that. But FHA loan is the next best thing, and everyone qualifies for that. And that's typically 3.5% down payment. And so if you're listening to this and you know want a great mortgage, this is the way to do it. You have to live in the property, like Dion said, but to really leverage, you can either live in it and get roommates if it's a single family, or you use it to buy a 1, 2, 3, 4 units, no more than 4 units. It's got to be 4 units or fewer. It's called a small multifamily. Your residential loan works exactly the same way. And this is what a lot of people don't understand, is that you actually get qualified for a bigger mortgage and a bigger purchase if you do get an FHA loan. If you do buy a small multifamily. So the way to look at it is, you might say, well, I'm approved for $100,000 house with 20% down because I've got $20,000. And so I'm going to go get a conventional loan, and you go buy a single family house that has an $800 mortgage payment. If you would have gone and said, hey, let me get a FHA loan and let me go see what I can approve for on a quad or a 4 unit, the bank's going to say, oh, great. You're going to get more than $100,000. We might even give you $550,000 or $600,000 mortgage, because those 3 other units we know are rental income, and that is now going to count as your income. So they just take what your day job income is, add those 3 units to your income to approve this loan for you, and then you're still bringing 20% down or fewer, like 3.5% down. So you're bringing 3, but that $20,000 is going to go much further, because you're putting that down on a $700,000 quad. And let's just pause right there, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, I've been told not to get a mortgage that's so big, and it's risky." And the way I look at it, it's risky not to do this, because now you've got 3 people paying for your entire mortgage, and a much bigger mortgage, but you were going to be paying $800 on a single family house. Now you're probably going to be paying $0 on a 4 unit. Maybe you're paying $500, but even if you're paying $800, all you have to do is sit and wait and let those tenants pay off this massive mortgage for you over time, and their rents are going to go up over time. You're still going to have the exact same homeowner expenses, because you both have one roof that you're going to have to replace at some point, one landscaping bill that you're already going to have to deal with the landscaping, or hire someone out. Like, all your housing expenses are the same. You just have, it's just chopped up, and you've got 3 other people chipping in on to cover those expenses and giving you some income. And this is the path. The fastest path. It's not the only path, like you said, Dion. This is the fastest, truest path to leveraging your living expenses to really change your financial future.
One of the things I would like to say before we wrap up is, sometimes an investor will ask the question, which do you prefer, single family house or multifamily apartment complexes? And there's kind of benefits to both. Single family gets the best lending options. You can owner occupy, you can house hack, lower turnover rate. Multifamily scales faster, usually has enough income for things like gyms or pools. Um, the compromise is up to 4 units. Duplex, triplex, fourplex. You get the lending options of single family. FHA will go all the way up to 4. VA will go all the way up to 4. Conventional loans for a house with an ADU might only be 3% down, and mortgage insurance drops off when you hit 22% equity. Whereas with FHA, it stays till you refinance or pay off or sell. So like there's even conventional loans that you can use that are better products than FHA on more than 1 unit. But it scales like the larger apartment complexes, and you maintain a lower turnover rate. My tenants have their own yards, own fenced yards. They actually do their own lawn care. This is their house, basically, compared to an apartment. And the biggest argument I hear from some people is, well, if you have a 10-unit apartment complex and 1 unit is empty, you have 9 units paying. So that's a better, right? It's worse. You're drawing 10 types of tenants in the same area, possibly from the same economic drivers. If one company shuts down, layoffs, furloughs, or something, all of your tenants can be impacted. If you buy 5 duplexes that are all 10 miles apart from each other, the way I've done all my properties my goal is 10 miles apart from the others. They're pulling from things like the base, the port, the college, the hospital, several different economic drivers. The money that it took to buy the 10-unit apartment complex, the down payment required for that, you would get 4 or 5 duplexes for the same amount of money in the same down payments. You still have 8 to 10 units. So if one is empty, the rest are still paying all of your bills, just like buying the large multifamily. Because the large apartment complexes have a couple of negatives that I don't like. One, they usually want more down, 25 to 35%. Two, you're not going to usually get fixed rate debt. On a 10-unit apartment complex, you're often going to have an adjustable rate mortgage, or you're going to have a loan reevaluation period at 7 or 10 years where they look at your net operating income and determine if you're still a safe investment. They could force you to sell at a time when interest rates are high, prices are low, and you can't get out of there without losing money. So there's a long list of reasons why I chose residential loans, 30-year fixed rate debt, but only have 1 single family because it's what made sense because I had it before I was an investor. The rest have all been small multifamily. So as an investor, if you're looking to duplicate what I've done, that's the asset class that I prefer.
I love that. So you, where are you located? Washington?
Yep. All my rentals are between Tacoma and Olympia in Washington, but not in either of the cities. They're all outside the cities.
Okay. And do you mind sharing sort of the price range that you bought?
So I bought some around 300 to 400,000 for duplexes when interest rates were 6%. So in 2020, I was able to refinance to 3 and greatly increase cash flow. Currently, duplexes are 400 to 500,000 in my area. I mean, if you want 3 bedrooms, 2 baths each side with 2-car garage, you might pay more. But I like 2 or 3 bedrooms, 1 or 2 baths, 1-car garage. I'm looking for rents for the working class people. I want my rents between $1,300 and $2,000. I don't want super expensive ones. That's more likely to take a hit in an economic downturn. And if there is an economic downturn, my rentals will see more demand because people can move down from Class A or B to Class C. Very rarely does anybody go to a Class D war zone, even in an economic downturn. So mine's more of a strategy that's well diversified. So I want to keep my rents around that market, around Class C.
I love that. And also, a lot of times I think first time investors, they buy something that they want to see that, I would want to live in this myself. And to me, that's like, you're buying something that's very desirable. It is a lifestyle decision. It's not a spreadsheet decision. And sometimes that's a Class A property where it has nowhere else. There's no way it can go up. It can only go down. And over time, it will go down because everything's going to be 20 years old and it's just going to feel dated no matter what you do to it. And you're constantly spending money to try to keep it relevant, which you shouldn't do on a rental property. I sort of love that sweet spot of the Class B, Class C, where it's like, hey, these are older, but they're functional. They're typically in a desirable area still. They're just not ritzy. They're not like, and so if there's a repair, I don't have to get the most expensive faucet because if I don't, it doesn't fit in. It's, hey, we all let's just get the average one that everyone else has that's mass produced and is much cheaper. So that's sort of your asset class is sort of, I always recommend it's sort of the sweet spot as well. And if you really wanted to, you could renovate it and excuse me, make it a Class A property. But
You could, and I have some friends who do that, but I don't think the return matters because some people will look at what units in that area are renting for, and it doesn't care if your unit is gold plated or the best, most fancy interior. They're going to say that one three houses down is less. That's where they're going to rent. So in certain Class A areas, sure, those kind of high end amenities matter, but in mine, it's like you said, I can replace a refrigerator for $700, brand new.
Yeah.
That's what would look right in that unit. It's easier to maintain the units that way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, is there anything you want to share? Any other sort of advice that you think that someone who's thinking about getting into this, maybe they've gotten stuck, or maybe a lesson you've learned that you find that sharing it kind of makes people feel a little bit easier about sort of changing their life through real estate rentals?
A lot of people look at risk mitigation when they're making decisions. If you're going to drive your car, you're going to have insurance. If you're going to drive your car, you might not want to be on a moped. You want to be in a car with doors around you and seat belts and safety devices. When you look at real estate investing, a lot of people let fear make their decision. I'm afraid I'll have a unit empty. I'm afraid a unit might get trashed. I'm afraid a unit might burn down. I'm afraid I might have to go through an eviction. So like risk mitigation, we have fear mitigation. If you're afraid that a tenant might stop paying the rent, you can add rental loss insurance to your insurance policy. If you're afraid a property might burn down, you have homeowners insurance. If you are afraid you might have to go through an eviction, there's two things that I've done to completely eliminate that fear to where it's just something that could happen, and I don't care if it does. Find a good real estate attorney in your area, read reviews, look for references from other investors that you meet at local REI meetups. Give them a retainer. It'll usually cost you about $1,500 to take $1,500, give it to that attorney. They are now on retainer. Ask that attorney if there's any specific verbiage that you could put in your lease in your area that would make that attorney's job so much easier if you had to go through an eviction. So now you have an attorney who has the funds to start an eviction process that you don't have to spend in the future. You have the verbiage in your lease that will make that attorney's job easy if you have to go through an eviction. To where I sit back now, I've never gone through an eviction. I just did one with a friend who purchased in November, had to do an eviction, did the same thing. You retain an attorney, here's what's in your lease, 14-day eviction. Fear mitigation comes from these four words. Confidence comes from competence. The more skills in real estate investing that you learn, like how to get the area average rents, how to find and secure a good lease, how to communicate with your tenants, every one of those skills that you become competent at, you will gain the confidence to add to your investing and not have those fears of, sometimes it's the wrong fear of thinking, what if I have a unit that sits vacant? That's what a new investor thinks. An experienced investor thinks, I wonder how many times I might have to dip this rent down a little bit to get a tenant in there. That's the fear we actually look at. And it's not a fear, it's a math equation. And that completely gets rid of the fear of how long would a unit sit vacant. So that's my advice when you're just starting out. Learn the skills and then find ways to mitigate your fear, because my biggest fear is the way I lived the first 40 years of my life. If your source of income is your job where you have to sell your life 1 hour at a time, what are you going to do when nobody's buying? Instead of having several different streams of income that make work completely optional, to where sometimes I still work. I love my job. I run a CDL school. I get to play in trucks like they're a go-kart. I have simulators to play in. I get to help people find a job. But sometimes I wake up and I think, wonder if I can get fired today. And I just don't need the job because the income is not coming from the job. It's just something I do. And I want to get as many of you to that point as we possibly can.
No, I love that. And, I always, an extra layer of sort of risk mitigation is, what are my outs? Like when I buy a property, it's, can I live in this worst case scenario if I need to? And can I move into it? It might not be my dream home, but at least that might be an option. Can I, Airbnb it? Would this be a good short-term rental? Can I find a long-term rental tenant? If I am buying it because it's a short-term rental, can I also make money as a long-term rental? Can I renovate this and sell this for more? Can I just try to create, can I add an extension off the back? Can I go up on it? Can I rezone it? Like, I just try to go through all these scenarios. And so I have a playbook of like disaster scenarios. Well, if this didn't work out, I can do this. If that doesn't work out, I can do this too. So that's sort of how I look at a property. It's not, this is going to be a short-term rental, do or die. It's okay. If I die as a short-term rental, if they change the rules, they don't allow it to be a short-term rental, or Airbnb goes out of business or whatever, can I still make money as a long-term? Okay, at least that's my out. And then if that doesn't work, can I can I move into it if I have to in a short-term rental and sell my other house or rent that out? So I always try to play as many scenarios. And then I go in with so much confidence in every single deal. So I think that strategy with your strategy where you're taking off all the risk and the liability or hedging against it, it really makes it an easy no-brainer decision to just acquire property after property. So are you done buying properties? You said you're buying one more with your VA loan. Do you think that'll be your last one, or are you just sort of playing it by ear?
Currently, my goal is to try to get to 10 mortgages in my own name. I have that, the best benefit we have is owner occupied or residential lending up to 4 units, even if it's not owner occupied, 30-year or even 40-year fixed rate debt on asset that's appreciating, that's experiencing principal pay down and cash flow. There's no reason to not keep adding. After that, if I wanted to grow, I could go with the SCR commercial. There's several different lending options to go beyond that. But I'm probably going to buy 1 or 2 more now, and because I have 6 mortgages in my name. I've paid off the single family house. So I have 7 properties, 16 units with 6 mortgages. I might add 1 or 2 more, and I don't know if I'll buy after that. I might. I don't know.
It gets
52.
addicting. I mean, once you do one of these and you're like, oh, wow, this is a little ATM machine that shows up every month. Why don't I want another ATM machine? Why don't I think everyone's like, every investor is like, I just need 2 or 3. And then they're like, well, this is fun. And I've got all this free time. Why don't I just get 7, 8, 9? And it's just, at least that's the path that I seem to be on. But
there's a really hard switch in our brain that we need to flip. And I'm right at the point of almost there.
yeah.
When we start investing, in my mind, we're very poor because we figure out what it takes to live, and everything above that, we save to invest. So while we're saving to investing, we're always at that poor level. At some point, when the income snowball's kicked in and you're saving so much money, you're trying to find a place to put it to work, you start doing things like I went from my 15 to 20-year-old cars to a Ford Raptor, then a Corvette, then a Tundra jacked up. Now I have an F-250. So I've gone down nice cars, right? And I've taken more vacations. I've been to Colombia and Thailand, and so I'm enjoying life.
Mhm.
But at some point, if we stop saving to invest, but we have the cash flow from all of these, I have to figure, like if I did that today and it's okay, I'm not going to buy any more properties. I now have to figure out, how do I spend $14,000 a month? Like, I haven't done that in the last years. That's a whole new thing I have to learn how to do.
Right.
I'm sure I'll figure it out though.
Yeah. I think friends will help you with that problem. Yeah. Well, Dion McNeely, if this has been wonderful, this is very educational. You're started at 40 with $17 job, $700 in a bank, going through a divorce, 3 kids. How old are you right now?
52.
52, 12 years later, you're making 6 figures in your sleep. So if Dion can do it, I promise you guys, you can do it too. It doesn't matter what age you are. It just takes about 10 years and a dedicated sort of focus to just try to acquire one property a year and just one step in front of the other, working out your credit and finding a rental here and there. This is very inspirational, Dion. How can people follow you, find you, and learn more about you?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom. I answer every question that comes in. I'm still small enough with only 10,000 subscribers. I can answer the comments that come in. On Tuesday afternoons at 4 p.m. Pacific, I do a live stream that usually lasts somewhere between 2 to 3 hours, where I answer every question that comes in.
And that's on Dion Talk Financial Freedom on YouTube.
Correct.
All right. 7 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesdays, 4 o'clock Pacific. Thank you so much, Dion. Wonderful. I know I'll see more of you in our internet chat rooms, and we'll race each other to answer all the questions. But your wealth of information and your inspirational. Appreciate you coming on the House of AC today.
No, I appreciate it. Ciao.
All right. I'll see you next time.